Hello and welcome to the March 2025 ENSO seminar. So today we will be joined from Colombia by Maria Clara Garavito, who is a philosopher and researcher in phenomenology and also a sort of cognitive science, obviously running the gamut. And as we might hear as well, some interest in whose recent work has approached the issue of emotions in various ways. Maria is, as I mentioned, she's based in the National University of Colombia, but also Maria completed a postdoc at the Autonomous University in Mexico. And I think it is that postdoc work and work around that we'll be hearing from Maria today. So thank you, Maria Clara, for joining us and for sharing your work with us.
Thank you, Marek, for inviting me or for letting me to present my ideas on this topic.
You are very welcome, and I'm very glad to have you here. So, yeah, excuse me. So we already have a sort of a few people present and watching the live stream. So, I think we are set up and ready to go. So I guess without further ado, we might invite you to. Oh, hang on a second. I'll have to. That's it. That's the live stream coming in on the back channel there.
Okay.
My apologies for that. So yeah, that's we're all set. So I might invite you to share your screen and we can hear your talk on. I've lost my screen now. There we go. Identity, otherness, and somatoparaphrenic.
Well, I changed a little bit, but I think your presentation is better than mine. But it's okay. Okay. Can I start the presentation or?
Please, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry. Well, welcome to my presentation. I am talking. I will talk about identity, awareness, and somatoparaphrenia. This presentation has 4 parts. Somatoparaphrenia and ownership of the body is the first part of the presentation. The second one is body identity and personal identity. The third one, self-awareness and other awareness, and in the end, the conclusions. So about the first part, about somatoparaphrenia and ownership of the body. Somatoparaphrenia would be understood as is a condition where patients. Sorry, I cannot see my own presentation. Somatoparaphrenia is a condition where patients attribute the ownership of one of their limbs to another person. Although Carl Jaspers had already described cases of patients with this condition, it was the psychiatrist Joseph Hertzman in 1942 who coined the term somatoparaphrenia. And somatoparaphrenia has to do with injuries, or had to do in that moment, with injuries in the right hemisphere, producing contralateral neglect. And I mean, in some limb of the left hemisphere, left part of the body, is experienced as not belonging to the whole body. And what was interesting was that in this condition, not only did the patients report the experience of the limb as not belonging to the rest of the body, but sometimes they actively rejected the limb, a phenomenon known as misoplegia. In some cases, the experience was also accompanied by personal stories, stories associated with non-belonging, and some stories about who the limb belongs to. So, I think the more famous case about somatoparaphrenia that has been worked in the recent times is FB. and that was presented by Liang and Lane in 2009. And the case is presented as here. A woman, a B, reported that her left hand belonged to her niece and that she, a B, felt no tactile sensations there. In a series of controlled tests, a B, while blindfolded, was advised that the examiner would touch her left hand. Next, the examiner would in fact touch the dorsal surface of a B's hand. Whenever this was done, a B said that she could feel no tactile sensations. When advised that the examiner was about to touch her niece's hand, however, upon actually being touched, she reported feeling tactile sensation. Although Mayes's paper, because I am quoting here one of the papers of Michel Mayes about this topic, this paper delves into the discussion about the possibility of sustaining the principle of immunity to error through misidentification and delusions, such as thought in insertion and somatoparaphrenia. And the discussion is more related with philosophy of mind and the discussion of this author with Rosenthal. Well, I'm not going to talk about this discussion because I am not here particularly interested in this topic. But I think what Mayes, there's something that is interested in Mayes's discussion about this case, and that is that B was, according to Mayes, was immune to making mistakes about where the experience occurs, but not about who the experience happens to. So for a B, the sensations, and this is the main part of what I'm going to discuss, the sensations occur in this hand. She has a perspectival ownership of those sensations, but she attributes the sensations to her niece. She does not have personal ownership over those sensations. So in this case, the distinction between perspectival ownership and personal ownership is going to be interesting to me, because, according to the author, perspectival ownership is related to bodily spatiality and the ownership of body parts, or we can say that, but personal ownership has to be with the representation of the self related to autobiographical memory. But I take this distinction, and my reflection about from a more phenomenological perspective would be if we can clearly distinguish between the ownership of the body and its parts, which constitutes perspectival ownership, and autobiographical memory, which constitutes personal ownership. And maybe we can discuss a different response to what is happening with FB. I don't know, that's the discussion. And the second part of this presentation is about body identity and personal identity, because of course this idea of the particular sense of what is happening to the body has to do with the body identity. And in this case, I take the Jose Luis Bermudez idea. He has a paper about somatoparaphrenia in 2017, and he said, he's well known because he discussed about body identity, and he said ownership is not defined by the boundaries of the body and its parts. Ownership, and we would see this ownership in case of the sensations of the body, is constituted in the situation. That is why it is flexible and dynamic. So the connectivity of the parts is related to the spatiality of the body, and from this perspective, it follows that the ownership of the parts is related to the body as a whole, is relational, not localized, and this actually explains the possibility of having a sense of ownership over artifacts, or to incorporate artifacts to the experience of the whole body. So we can think about if a particular sensation is a part of the whole experience of the whole identity of the body. Additionally, as the identity of the body and its parts are related to the activity of the organism, they are organized based on its intentional experience, and it has to be more with this idea of Merleau-Ponty that the body schema is constituted in the intentional act of dealing with in which the world is given to us. In other words, the position and states of the parts indicate our relationship with the world, and this relationship with the world involves us as subjectivities. Although de Villemont has a different paper about somatoparaphrenia, and although I am not going to discuss the whole idea, I think one of these, I remarked the idea of this identity and body identity is also affective. And this idea of we have a particular affections about our own body, and our identity has to do with these affections. And I took this concept from Fuchs' oikeiosis, that actually is comes from Stoics, and the oikeiosis as the familiarity with what is one's own. It is associated with the feeling of protection, care about our own body. So we don't need to have a representation of a whole body, but our body for being experienced, but a feeling of this is my body, of this is what is familiar to me. And this is different to the feelings related to the lack of familiarity with what is not one's own. For instance, misoplegia, the rejection of a part of the body, in cases of somatoparaphrenia, for example, there are erotic feelings about the missing limb, the limb that is not a part of the body. So this kind of feelings has to do with more with this experience of a different, of they had to do with this, like this is not a part of me. And my question is that autobiographical familiarity? So my idea is that we cannot distinguish between this perspectival identity, or the identity of the spatiality of our body and its parts, and the biographical familiarity, and the personal ownership. So if we follow Bermudez's perspective on body identity, we would need to say that the autobiographical familiarity has to do with the spatiality, the experience of the spatiality of our own body. I would say that for a B, even though she has sensations in the hand, they only make sense when they are part of a body that belongs to another person. So this case, the particularity of this case is that FB has not sensations or reported sensations of the hand when is ascribed, those sensations are ascribed to her, but the sensations arrive with, they are ascribed to Denise. So although she has those sensations, they only make sense when they are part of a different body. We need to delve into this idea of different body being experienced at the limits of my own material body. And this is the third part of the presentation. I hope, okay, I am on time. So this idea of self-awareness and other awareness in the limits of the material body. And well, the idea of intersubjectivity in psychopathology and in delusions is not new. Actually, Fuchs has some very interesting papers about that, and some insights about the delusion of thought insertion as a problem of intersubjectivity. And Jean-Michel Roy in Spanish has a very interesting paper about that, the same topic. And I think this is a very new and interesting perspective about delusions, because in the tradition is the discussions are more related to the problem of the subjectivity in the loss of agency or loss of ownership in delusions. But well, I think it's a very interesting perspective to discuss the problem of intersubjectivity in these cases. What makes, and my question here is, what makes a limb be experienced as not one's own versus what makes a limb be experienced as someone else's? So that's the difference, the change of the question brings us a different perspective. And well, according to my essay's paper, the alienation of the hand occurs through an objectifying intentional act. The idea of the limb that don't belong to my body identity is experienced as an object. But I think, and I contrast this idea with the patient's reported experience, because in FB and in different cases about somatoparaphrenia, is not the lost limb is not actually experienced as an object. Actually, is a part of a body, a different body. I think about the thing in the Adam's family. Thing is not an object. Actually, has life and has a personality. And I think in this case of somatoparaphrenia is similar. It's not particular. It's not the experience is more like an empathetic experience, like intersubjective experience rather than experience with an object. I have a very related a case related to FB that is in a different paper in Spanish from a group of neuropsychologists in a Chilean hospital. And it's Lalito's case. And I think it's similar and highlights this idea of the relation, the intersubjective relation with the limb or with another through the limb, to the missing level. And Lalito's case, when she took it's a different woman that has the same somatoparaphrenia. When she took the hand, the somatoparaphrenic hand, after insisting repeatedly that she searched for it, she believed it was her son Eduardo's, and she started caressing it. When suggested to try to communicate with her son, she spoke to it. When there was no response, she became anxious, saying, "It's so cold, it's not answering me. Could he be dead, doctor?" And another moment, she urged, "Answer them, answer the doctors." Another day, she confided, sorry, "I saw him when he lay down next to me. He was so cold." On one occasion, a nociceptive stimulus was applied to the hand, which she vaguely perceived, and she was perplexed to feel a current, as she assumed the hand being stimulated was her son's. On some occasions, an examiner answered her, pretending to be the son, and she accepted those responses as true. When the examiner moved the hemiplegic hand from the left, she was happy. Lalito is alive. Well, that's my translation of this case. And well, to me, it's interesting because we can see this intersubjective experience. My hypothesis is that in somatoparaphrenia, the alienated limb appears as participating in the intentionality of another body. In somatoparaphrenia, an empathetic intentional act rather than objectifying intentional act takes place, and through an empathetic intentional act, B and Lalito's mother experience the hand as belonging to someone else. Sorry, there's a mistake. What does it mean to say that in somatoparaphrenia there is empathy? That sensation is not enough for bodily self-awareness. Sensation is experienced as one's own if it participates in the situated connectivity of the parts through which a bodily spatiality is constituted. In the case of somatoparaphrenia, the sensation has been detached from that connectivity, but an additional step is needed for the sensation to belong to a specific other. Different idea. I suggest that the alienated limb belongs to a certain other when experienced with a certain style. And I am very interested in the idea of style as more than an expression of, but more as related as my bodily autobiography or bodily biography. What do I mean by style? Style is a term I borrowed from phenomenology to understand the particular way a body expresses itself in various situations. So remember the concept of oikeiosis. Style is the familiar way we relate bodily to the world. That is why I say that has to do with my autobiographical memory. It's expressed in a style. Style is observed in the parts of the body as they participate in the whole. Here I am thinking into soccer players that very famous, and although they are playing the same game and they are in the same position, their styles are different. So personal identity is linked to ways, particular types of feeling, moving, and perceiving the world, which correspond more to a bodily memory than to a memory as a set of images from the past. In other words, personal identity is expressed in a bodily style. Style accompanies the self-perception of perspective as well. In somatoparaphrenia, the alienated limb reveals a foreign style, with the sensation being projected onto that other to whom this style corresponds. Thinking Eduardo Lalito's limb. The limb is called, and has some style that does belong to the mother's style rather than the other. This projected other is a quasi-presence, and this concept came from Merleau-Ponty. I have a paper with the two colleagues about this idea in virtuality, but I think the other is present through the limb as a quasi-presence. This implies another awareness in the sensation of the hand and its movement. So, well, for the conclusions, the sharp separation between personal ownership and perspectival ownership overlooks the fact that perspective is constituted from bodily memory. If the sensations of an alienated limb are not part of the body's ownership, it is because proprioception cannot be reduced to localized sensations. It is constituted in a situated and historical way. An exploration of other awareness in somatoparaphrenia can delve into the constitution of intercorporeal experiences. And well, that's it. I have some references here, I think the main references, but if you need to know more, you want more information, I can share. So, well, that's it. Thank you. Sorry for my
Fantastic.
English sometimes.
No, this is perfect. Thank you very much. That was wonderful, and I am particularly pleased to see style make such a significant appearance here, and I'm going to have lots to talk to you about that
Okay.
in a few minutes. So I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and the live stream just to see if any questions appear there. But in the meantime, I might follow up on a few things with you, but I might start with something just in essence, it's just a kind of a clarifying a note that it was on, or a point that was on one of the early slides, and just invite you to say a bit more of it. In a way, I think it became more clear to me as the talk went on, and I think but I think it might be worth just um, addressing it a little bit directly, and just to make sure that I've fully understood.
Mhm.
So in sort of one of the early sections, you talk about hang on a second. I'm looking at the wrong piece of paper. The connectivity of the parts is related to the spatiality of the body. So this was excuse me, a crucial aspect of how ownership and sort of connectivity were related. And I guess if I could ask you to just maybe expand on that point a little bit more. I know it sort of addresses, but so when you use the phrase the spatiality of the body there, for instance, is that in terms of its kind of the wholeness of it, the way it's all embedded in a situation, or is there something more specific to do with maybe something like Sean Gallagher's um, prenoetic sort of conditioning of experience by the body?
Okay, well, yes, I think it has to do with the idea of proprioception, for instance, as this discussion that appears in How the Body Shapes the Mind, the classical book, about how to understand proprioception as if we need to understand it as summarize of sensations that are localized, or that like the sum of this different sensation, or as a whole experience of the body that interacts with sensations, but in which the sensations has acquired some meaning. So the meaning of the sensations are not related to the localized experience, rather than this interaction with the whole body. To me, that idea it's important for the somatoparaphrenia, and specifically in the case of FB case, because the sensation, although she has the sensation in a localized part, this sensation has no meaning in her whole experience, in the spatiality of her own body. Only has meaning in another body. So this idea of what we understand as perception and proprioception as a particular perception, and the distinction between perception and sensation, and proprioception and sensation. So it's like in perception, sensations only appears as perception when has meaning to us. And in this case, I think it's similar. I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying.
Yes,
So,
no, I do, and so I think I do understand, and it's one of those things that I've often, I mean, that there perhaps a key reference for me on this is always Walter Freeman's neurodynamic work. So it
claro.
was, one of the
Okay.
ways in which Freeman was sort of very explicit about the fact that sensations by themselves have no specific meaning nor role to play until they become incorporated into already occurring activity. And
Mm.
so I think it's the same notion here that any aspect of perception. So obviously Freeman was looking at olfactory
Yes.
perception mostly in rabbits, but in this case it
Huh?
is proprioception is only or the sensations that are crucial to proprioception are always perturbations to something that's already happening. And it's the relationship of those perturbations to the ongoing flow of bodily behavior. That's how sensations and proprioception are related. It's not there's no meaning in the sensations themselves.
Yes, and to me, the next step is that this body spatiality has to do with the historical experience. Well, of course, I am according to Merleau-Ponty and all different. It's not my it's not on my idea, but we
Mm,
need to think in body spatiality as constituted historically, and it has to do with autobiography. So, but autobiography and body spatiality affects the sensation, the proprioceptions, and
mm,
for that was my problem with this this distinction, that sharp distinction between ownership, personal ownership, and
mm.
perspectival ownership. But because for me, well, for this idea is it's the same. It's a continuum rather than
Yes.
discrete experiences.
I mean, this point resonates very nicely with our last ENSO seminar, actually, Giovanni Colombetti, who draws on a similar notion of affectivity in order to really criticize that distinction between autobiographical identity and other forms of identity. So I think there's certainly, two different research agendas arriving at the same conclusion from two different perspectives is always
Yeah.
always good to have a bit of independent verification, as it were, or parallel convergence on, or well,
Yes,
convergence on.
definitely. And well, my here my author of reference is Fuchs, but I think it's the same. It's it's all of us are
Yes,
revolving in the same idea or parallel ideas.
yeah,
And actually, I really like Joanna's work. I was with her in Exeter, and Joel for a visiting. I did a visiting in Exeter, so
time
I
well spent.
knew them. Hmm.
Good. So I mean, I guess that I think the rest of it links up very nicely, and I think I'm sort of grasping all of it. So I guess what I really want you to do is talk a lot more about style. It's wonderful to see it come up. I think it's a very important issue. It's interesting. I think that it hasn't been more explicitly and more fully unpacked within, particularly the inactive literature up to this point. So I'm very pleased to see it make an appearance. Um, so I guess I mean, am I right? And but I don't know the primary literature on this well. So um, my if I sort of picked up from your talk the right ideas, then style really has a lot to do with that historical dynamic process of engaging in anything, whether it's I mean, and essentially it's always going to be some form of skilled activity, but any skilled activity in which we engage in is always it always has a twist or a spin on it because of the way in which we've learned it. So, you and I might learn the same skill, but because we've learned it in slightly different ways, we'll always have idiosyncratic, little individual quirks or specifics. One of my go-to examples on this one is always accent. Um, we speak, you speak more languages than I do, but we both speak English. We speak it with different accents, but it is both English. And even if people wanted to be conservative and say, well, let's just talk about native speakers, there is no one stable accent for any language. So there's no canonical version of any language. There can only be different styles of doing the thing. And so, I mean, is that kind of capturing that notion of style? Is that the way Merleau-Ponty's talking about it? Is that the way that you're intending to speak on it in that way?
Yeah, well, yes, I when I read about the style, I always think that we tend to confuse or to combine two different concepts that are related but are not the same. That is expression and style. So of course, under I understand expression as the current here and now way in which style uh, appears, expresses, sorry, or appears, but um, style has to do with this autobiography and this historical what you were saying actually this history, this idiosyncratic ways in which we deal with the world in a corporeal way. So this is more, the Merleau-Pontian idea of style is more related with uh, this idea of the autobiography way of moving or the history rather than the expression. So to me, that difference is very important for understanding intercorporeality. And I think actually in Merleau-Ponty, according, I want to highlight this distinction in Merleau-Ponty for intercorporeality, intercorporeal purposes, because when we see when we interact with someone, of course expression has is very important, and in different ideas of intercorporeality always expression is part of these thoughts about incorporality. But I think when we don't interact with expression, but with the style that is expressed in the body. So it's not just that do you express sadness or you express different things in your body, but you express a style of being sad, a style of being, and you tell me you in that you are telling me who you are rather than what are you experiencing this moment, or what of course you are expressing what you are experiencing this moment, but as you, as Marek. So the expression is more than yes, to be aware or of some emotions or some senses, some meanings of the world in here and now, but this historical thing. And to me, in delusions, as such as somatoparaphrenia or thought insertion, this distinction is important. It's very important because, of course, the voice is expressing ideas, but of someone in particular. But because what it is saying, or he or she is saying in certain way that is different to myself, to me, to the way I express, to my style. So, well, sometimes I cannot express very well in English, but the idea is that that's the idea, that is for intercorporeality is important to do that distinction.
No, I love that. That's really good. I think that makes a lot of sense. It also just from when you were speaking there, it was sort of striking me that it's making clear that the process of autobiography, which we so frequently couch purely in narrative terms, and again, which Giovanna was criticizing in the February talk is essentially, rather than being a narrative, it's a way of being me. And you know, we have our habits, we have our accents, we have our techniques, we have our styles, and um, as you say, any given expression, any given action that we undertake in a me kind of way. And that, but it's impossible not to do it in a me kind of way, right? It's impossible to do it any other way because of our individual histories. And it's one thing in particular when you're talking about the sadness that you know if excuse me, if we speak and we might speak sadly, and therefore the sadness is expressed in what we say, even if the words don't contain sadness themselves, you know, if the words aren't typical ways in which sadness is expressed. But then it is also true that um, the sadness is an adverb, as it were. It's a way of doing the other action. But in all cases, at the same time, we are doing the sadness. We're just doing it in a verbal way, whereas it might be that we also do it in a way that has to do with posture or gait. And as I guess we all know, and that there's lots of research on it too, that all of these small things are also they are also sensitive and so variable to fine-grained details that the person is always present. You know, you can recognize someone just from the way they move, the way they walk, the way they talk. The smallest of sounds or the smallest of movements are usually enough for us to immediately tell someone who is familiar. And this, I guess, gets to your final crucial point about the possibility of misrecognizing someone in the case of somatoparaphrenia in our own body. And so this gets what I think is actually in many ways this is quite a difficult or tricky question because in essence there's an experience of sociality there, an intercorporeality, as you say, but it's one in which there there isn't an agency. And ordinarily, when we're engaging with other people, you know, when it's intersubjective in some way, or when we're engaging bodily with another, and so there's something really genuinely intercorporeal going on. Here we have a case that it doesn't seem to be intercorporeal. That this, while there's a narrative that the person seems to express that is intercorporeal, we call it a pathology because you know that isn't Eduardo's hand. That wasn't you know, FB's niece's hand. And so I'm wondering, I mean, in a sense, this is is there a challenge here, for example, to something like participatory sense making, or you know, what is the sort of edge case that we're dealing with, um, where this something is you know very much being experienced as intersubjective that cannot be intersubjective in the same way. Where is that recognition of the niece or Eduardo coming from? Is there something about the neglected, you know, what is it about the neglected hand that is that seems to have Eduardo's style or the you know the niece's style? And so if that's the explanation, where is that perception of style coming from? That becomes the kind of our next question as to, well, how is style perceived in such a way that it can be misperceived in this particular way?
Yeah.
And have we, you know, have we resources to try and engage with that question?
Okay, well, it's interesting question because of course there is limit in what we can say about these particular cases because we only have these reported experiences by the neuropsychologists that of course has different perspective, different or are interested in a different perspective of somatoparaphrenia. But according to my hypothesis, I think what we have a background, a past of interaction with Denise or Lalito or Eduardo that we cannot here and now capture, but that are very are how can I say this? It's in the past. There is a familiarity in the way we have constructed some familiar bonds and familiar ways to deal with others and to interact with others that the patient brings to this situation. So I would say that there is something that we cannot fully understand in these reports, but if I am right, is present, that it has to do with slightly and ways in which the hand is expressing here and now that resembles the familiar way in which the other acts. For instance, I think I maybe not in these reports, but Donoso's, the Chilean neuropsychologist, has another case in which the patient says is that this is the my sister's limb because it's called like her, and in this case the sister was dead, recently has passed away, so it makes sense that the cold hand is the dead woman's hand. So I don't know if I am right, but I think there is something that resembles the previous experiences, previous intercorporeal experiences with a particular other. And actually, to me, it's more clear in thought insertion, because, or in some experiences, it's complicated to say that in Santa Teresa's mystic experiences, you are she has a thought in a delusion, but it's interesting in the description of her experience of that voices. She's describing God's voice, and the way she justifies this voice because of the expression of that voice is familiar to her. So I think the background is important to understand why this one and not another one is here in this interaction. But of course, it's just an hypothesis.
No, but I am a very interesting one, I think, and compelling. I do wonder in each of the cases whether particularly for FB and her niece, and for the Donoso's case with Eduardo Lolito, that these are people with whom they might have held hands. That they're this hand was some that they walked a child and therefore held hands with them, and it's obviously it very possible the case in the other Donosus case that you mentioned with the sister, and so it might just be again that there's some facet about that the difference of hand is enough for them to perceive it or recognize it as something, the closest habit they have is the one of holding hands with that other person, rather than it being, obviously too specific. I would love to know what FB did if her niece was present. Did at any point did they bring her niece into the room, and was she included in the conversation in other ways? But I guess we're probably not lucky enough to have that information.
But in case of Donoso's experiment, the experimenter plays like Lalitos and she responds. It's curious that
It is.
that
Um,
situation.
and it does also make clear that the altered experience of the body affects the situation as well as the other way around. So that it became possible for, the because Lolita was present, because the hand was the way it was, then Lolita's presence could also be incorporated in other ways through other, I presumably under some ambiguous circumstances. It wasn't just a matter of the the doctor just standing in front of the patient and speaking as Eduardo, but that there would have been some means by which they made the speech ambiguous, and the presence of the hand enough to disambiguate it as Eduardo in some way. But again, there's a lot of fine-grained detail we'd like to get at, but it bespeaks the interaction between body and world, and
Mhm.
the way in which the also again this fact that we've mentioned before, that perception is a flow that is perturbed by sensations, not something that is specified for them. So once again, you're in a flow in which Eduardo is present in some way, then other stimuli, for want of a better word, become Eduardoized in some way. Put a bit of
Mhm.
Eduardo spin on them. No, that's wonderful. That's all. I think the style issue is something, as I've mentioned, is it's particularly fascinating to open up and to find ways to try to talk about, and it demonstrates a kind of uh, the importance of being able to cope with individuality and idiosyncrasy in a way that science actually isn't very good at in general.
Mm.
It's not very good at asking questions about those things, and certainly isn't very good at answering them. And so anything that forces us to engage with that question more effectively, I think, is a bonus and a strength. And it's something that I think is particularly positive when taking a kind of an embodied and active view, that you have to start taking these things seriously. So, yes, very much looking forward to seeing more of this unfold over time. Um,
Yes.
yes. So, um, excuse me. So we are coming up on time. So I guess I will sort of maybe check briefly. Is there anything else that sort of has crossed your mind you want to make sure that you say before we finish up, or it's all good? Because I think there's a sort of a very richness, a sort of a rich talk there, and a lot of issues that again make a wonderful flow. When we talk about the value of continuity from Giovanna's talk last
Mm.
to yours here, and hopefully for future talks as well, if all goes well. So I will say thank you very much, Maria Clara, for sharing your work, and we will see everyone else very soon, hopefully for another ENSO seminar.
Thank you, Marek. And well, we get in touch for next work.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Now we are, so the live stream on YouTube is stopped, and now I will